say is thank you so much for coming into this space. I absolutely believe that even just this act of showing up here today is a really huge and not easy statement in a way, that you really are treating this experience with some of the care and the kindness and the tenderness that it deserves. Because I know in many ways, even as we're going through this, we all kind of are busy people and we all have other things that we could be doing with this time. So I want to ask you just to give yourself a bit of acknowledgement that you've even showed up into this space today, because that is a powerful action. And as you may be listening and joining into this call today, you might notice that other things kind of are popping up in the background for you, that there's other things on your to-do list, other things that are kind of calling for your attention, like even your phone, or maybe other people who are in your space right now. And I want to invite you to really just honor your decision to give yourself this time and space in being here right now, because I absolutely believe that this is important and you're going to get a lot out of this. And so one of the best ways to do that and to get the most out of this experience is to turn your phone ringer off, turn it on vibrate if you absolutely have to be waiting, on call for something, and get a pen and paper, because I'm going to be guiding you through some questions and some exercises for you that is really going to help you to take some of the ideas that I'm sharing with you and really use them right here, right now, today, to create some shifts and to just create a little bit more breathing space in this experience for you. So for those of you who don't know, I'm April. I'm a psychotherapist by trade, and I had been working, hey Sarah, I'd been working in this field for about 10 years before I lost my little girl, Nora. And for those of you who don't know my story, I'd had a healthy pregnancy, everything was fine, and I lost her when she was 1 day old. She just simply stopped breathing in my arms. And so even though I had, worked in this field and helped all kinds of people through all kinds of various forms of trauma and challenge and loss and grief and hard stuff, I was still absolutely taken out at the knees by my experience. And so I definitely know firsthand how absolutely huge and life-altering the experience of losing a baby really is, whether that's during pregnancy or sometimes after birth. I absolutely, for me, my experience of loss gave me absolutely profound shifts in my level of understanding and also in my own sense of passion and purpose for this work. So after I took a fair bit of time off work, I really returned to this and began to dedicate more and more time and space in my calendar and in my practice to be reaching out and connecting to other bereaved parents. Because one of the parts of this that made that feel absolutely so important to me was I had become, as I'm sure any of you are, excruciatingly aware of how much isolation that there is surrounding loss and how much discomfort our friends and family often have surrounding loss, and how there's sometimes just a real absence, and it can be really difficult to find really good supports and really good resources. So that is really what I have made a commitment to, is to helping to create more space for these conversations and to get more support out to women and couples when I know that you're going through the greatest heartbreak of your life right now. And I know full hand how wretched and disorienting that nightmare really is. So if you haven't already, feel free to say hi in the chat. You'll notice that little button just down below. Feel free to introduce yourself. This is also an opportunity to just kind of get a little bit more connected with other people on this call as well. And so what I'm going to be guiding you through today is I basically do these retreats on a monthly basis. And my focus topic for today is how to feel a little more in control and a little bit less lost after you've gone through the loss of your baby. And my reason for really focusing on this topic today is I've recently done a relocation. So I've moved from Ontario, Canada, and I'm over here in Rome for the next few months. And as I've been going through kind of just settling into, what my time looks like here, I've been noticing, I've been getting almost kind of those little flickers of flashbacks. Do you ever have that kind of sensation where you get almost just those little reminders of past feelings? And it was just taking me back to some of those earlier stages of my loss where I was so freaking lost, where I felt so completely unhinged from my world, from the life that I had planned, from my own self, from my relationships. I felt like that the ground underneath me was just in the state of constantly collapsing. So feel free to just let me know, either privately or to everyone, if you can relate to that feeling of everything being absolutely different now and life as you know it feeling suddenly changed and suddenly unsafe. And it just got me back to thinking about those earlier times where people would say things that were often really well intended, like, you just need to get out a little bit more, right? And they would have no awareness that this, that well-intentioned idea of saying, I just need to get out a little bit more. They had no understanding of what the reality is for a grieving mom. And even just going to the store, right? The number of triggers that we are surrounded by. And the fact that these simple little actions, like going to the store to get groceries, it's like navigating a minefield now. We're having to stand in line with a pregnant woman behind us or another woman who's yelling at her 5 kids, right? And is totally frustrated and annoyed with them and letting the whole store know it. Or the, checkout woman that's talking about how excited she is about her grandbabies that she's expecting into the world in the next 2 weeks. And, for women, I've come to absolutely become acutely aware of how much of our conversations, yeah, I do. Smart girl doing online deliveries. That's brilliant. Who else does online deliveries here? Has anybody else made use of that? It's a brilliant idea. Love it. Smart. Do you have a question, Alicia? Is there something that you wanted to ask? Or are you just saying I agree? Cool. Okay. So if you want to stop me, and feel free just to raise your hand like Allison did. I think you can just find that in the little corner of your button there. Yes. So every day is torture. And so while other people around you might have these really things that sound so simple, right? And like it would be so helpful if you just got out more. The amount of energy and the amount of risk that we're actually kind of putting ourselves into every time we step out our front door is enormous. And sometimes we don't even have to step outside our own door to do that, right? There's the baby shower invitations that arrive in our inbox. There's I remember one day opening my front door, and there was, has anyone ever got those packages from Nestle? And they're like the baby starter kits because somewhere along the line you bought like some kind of maternity wear or baby product, and they sold your email address to these big companies that send these welcome baby gifts. Or you've got those follow-up calls from different doctors and professionals that continue to ask you, questions about your pregnancy and upcoming things and how you're doing, when really your whole world has just been shattered. Yeah, and then you have the basic thing of other human beings wanting to smile at you and engage with you. And I don't know about you guys, but there was definitely times where I felt full of rage, right? I felt like I was barely hanging on to maintain socially appropriate standards of being a decent human being at various points in time, because there were so many moments when you would just want to shout at people, right? Like when you're even just getting your hair done and that really lovely hairstylist who's trying to just be nice and conversational is asking you questions about how many kids you have, right? And all that kind of stuff. And you're listening to the person beside you talk about her plans for her upcoming baby shower, right? With that innocence, that I so remember having, that belief that everything would always be okay. And, if you're here, you know all too well that that's not the case. So today I'm going to be sharing with you three ways that are going to help you to feel a lot more grounded and a lot more secure and have a lot more faith in your ability to get through this nightmare. And that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. So if you haven't done this already, grab a pen and paper because this is really important for you. The first thing that I want you to write out is what made you decide to come on to this call today. Yeah. It's so weird noticing how other people don't know how to approach me or act strange or funny around me. For sure, right? I remember coming across this word and it said, Medusas, referring to women who had lost babies. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is absolutely the best way to describe it. It's like all of a sudden we are too horrific to look at. And people just seem to keep their distance from us, right? It's almost like tragedy is seen as being contagious. And it's brutal because it means that we end up being unbelievably alone and almost feeling like we're being pushed away or rejected when we're going through when we have the greatest needs in our life. Brutal stuff to go through. So that's why these spaces, this coming together, this virtual gathering, this mini retreat today, I believe is so important. So really give yourself just a little bit of acknowledgement for showing up. And get your pen and paper, and I want you to write out a few things. First off, what made you decide to come into this space today? What do you need to get out of this time here that would make this feel like this has been a really good use of your time and effort for even just being here right now? And are there any questions? Are there any topics or any questions or any points that you've been feeling really stuck on that you're either hoping that I'm going to talk about today or that you maybe want to raise your hand and let me know when we get to the Q&A part? And then I want you to do anything else that you need to do to really just allow yourself to move fully into this space here and let yourself unhook from any of those other things that are maybe calling for your attention or time right now. Honor your commitment to be here fully and to give your own healing and your own wellness and survival this really intentional bit of time and attention today. So write it out. What do you want to get out of your time here? And feel free to private message me if you would like to and let me know. So my first strategy for you, the first idea that I want to offer that I believe is going to help you feel a whole lot less lost and disoriented right now, is the idea of getting still. This, ladies, I believe is your first task right now, getting still. There's this quote I like by Wayne Dyer, and he says, if you're not sure which direction to go, wait until you do. And I think that this is really hard to do, right? For one or two reasons. When we go through something as traumatic and devastating as losing a baby or a pregnancy, a few things happen to our system. Our system oftentimes really moves into this very primitive place of fight or flight, where this amygdala in the back of our brain goes off. And what that is it's basically our system's panic button. And it can move us into this state of having a whole lot of adrenaline and a whole lot of cortisol going through our bodies. And that can kind of jack us up a little bit, where if you ever find yourself kind of pacing around, or it almost feels like you've just got this like uncomfortable kind of energy going on in your body, or maybe that's less physical for you and it just comes out as being really irritable, right? Or really, really snappy with people around you. One of the reasons why that might be is because your body is in fight or flight mode. Your body, for very good reasons, has process this experience in your life is feeling like you're under threat. And of course it has. You've just lost a child. There's not much that becomes less under threat than that. This is as big as it gets, as you already know. And so for some people, this might put them into a coping strategy of trying to distract themselves and staying really busy, right? So this might look like checking your phone 1,000 times a day, right? Just to kind of be continuing to reach out and engaging in some kind of behavior, even though you don't really, you're maybe not even aware that you're doing it. For other people, this might really move into overworking, right? Taking on projects, jumping onto things, really just trying to like do. If you've watched on my earlier video, I did this interview with Kelly Farley, and he was talking about this idea that for him and his experience of going through grief, and I think this is especially true for a lot of guys that I've talked to, and a lot of the couples that I've talked to, he said that he basically just poured himself into his work, and he poured himself into the home renovations that he was doing at that time. And, for me, it is always, crazy when I see, how common that theme really is for a lot of the guys, the grieving dads. It's like the number of kitchen renovations that I've heard about, or basement renovations that I've heard about, is off the charts, right? And I think, as women, we can really get into this state too, where it's almost like we just kind of want to stay busy. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's also so much invisibility and pressure to just return to being your old self again, right? I think this is one of the things that makes the loss of a baby so extra difficult, right? When someone loses a husband, and I'm not saying it's better or worse, right? But when somebody loses a husband, we all kind of instantly acknowledge, oh my God, this woman needs time, right? As a society, we all move into this state of being very well aware that she's probably not going to come to work tomorrow, right? She's probably going to need some time off or whatever that is for her. But when we lose a baby, especially if that's during pregnancy, it's like so many people, one, do not know how to support you or what to say to you at all during this. And oftentimes when they do try to reach out and be supportive, what they're really telling you to do is move on, get back into the swing of things. And they say really stupid things like, just try again, right? Or don't worry, you're young. And, you'll feel better if you just come out with us on Friday, or if you just come over to our housewarming party, or if you just get back into work. Wouldn't you feel better if you were doing these things? And I don't necessarily believe that that would be the same advice that we would give someone who has just lost their husband. And yet, this is the way that we treat grieving mothers all the time. So, understandably so, we kind of jump on board with that sometimes. And we work to stay busy and just distract ourselves and kind of outrun this. And this is often where I see people end up with trouble in terms of sleep difficulties as well, right? Because I often have this theory from the various clients that I worked with, is that yes, absolutely, right? This absolutely can affect our sleep so significantly. But one of the reasons that this, I believe, often does, I think it's sometimes useful if you're having trouble with sleep to ask yourself this question: am I giving myself time and space to process this during the day? Because if your go-to coping strategy is just to stay busy and just to outrun this, then it can very much be that that it pushes back, right? When you finally take your grip off of just trying to keep it in that box, when you just take that kind of hand off of keeping that lid down, then it spins out later. Of course it does. And for most of us, that's when we're lying to bed at night and we're almost just allowing ourselves to let go. And then all of the pain and all the fears come running at us full force. The other way that this getting still can be really important, is to remove any of the extra layers of trigger and pain that you might be experiencing in your life. So this part is really important, and I want you to write it down right now. Get your pen out and really think about this. Where and how can you step away from any extra hurts or attacks or overwhelm or pressure or suffering? What are those areas in your life right now? Or who are those people in your life right now who are adding an extra layer of hurt and difficulty to what it is that you're going through? Because so often when we go through this, right, it's so disorienting, it's so overwhelming, that we're kind of just moving through the motions of this and doing anything we can just to kind of maintain our grip on life. So I want you to stop right now and check in and just kind of do a scan around you. Where are the places or people in your life where you experience that extra moment of ouch, ouch, right? Is that insensitive people? Is that, yeah, I'm just reading some comments here, for sure, right? Definitely. Pregnant friends, friends with new babies, people seem overly happy all the time, for sure, yes. And I'm going to cover a little bit of that later too, specifically about pregnant friends and pregnant coworkers. Absolutely. And so here's what I want to invite you to think about. Where can you create? Where would it feel good to create a little bit of distance between you and those people and places and things in your life that cause you pain? Because I think so often we get really afraid of the judgments, right, that people are going to say about us if we choose to opt out, right? I was talking to a client of mine a while ago, and she was saying to me that she is hosting her friend's baby shower. And I was like, ooh, so what's making you decide to do that? Because if that's really what you want to do, right? If that really is a full yes for you and that feels like the right thing that is right for you in your gut, then I will absolutely help you create a plan of how you do that. But for her, as we actually unpack that, what it really was about for her was, I'm afraid of the judgment and the criticism that I might receive if I do not do this. Because my old self would have been the one to do this. My old self would have been the one baking the cake, hosting the party, doing the decorations. And I don't want to think about what people are saying about me behind my back if I don't show up and do this as I usually would have. And I think we are all guilty of doing various things like that to ourselves all the time. So I believe that one of the most courageous and self-sustaining and survival things that we can do, because I absolutely believe that when we're going through this is about survival. This is huge. We are fighting a battle every day that most people are completely unaware of in our world, right? Of how big that battle actually really is. So where can you let yourself step back a little bit? And so maybe you are the person at work who would always say yes, right? Okay, no problem. I can take on that extra project. Or if there's that hanging opportunity to like pick up a ball and run with it, you're the person who jumps in there and does it. You're the old reliable person in your group of friends. You're the one that people come to. So where can you start to treat your own experience of grief like it is the most important thing going on in your world? Because I absolutely believe that this is. One of the things that I did early on that I believe was really helpful for me and really critical for me, actually, in a lot of different ways, was I took a long time off work. And even though there was times and days where that was uncomfortable to do, because, I would have days where I was feeling okay. And I was like, I could be working right now, right? And I almost felt guilty that I wasn't working right now. Let me know if you can relate to that feeling of feeling guilty, right? For not showing up and doing things in the way that you would usually do them. Because I think that's one of the experiences that we get hit with all the time, is that overwhelming guilt. And I would have those feelings of guilt, which is also shame, right? I would have these feelings of shame that I was impacted, that I didn't have it all together, right? This is this lost, horrible, disorientating thing. It is so freaking humbling, right? Before I went through my experience of loss, I kind of felt like I had it all pretty down pat. I felt like I really, had kind of mastered how you do life in many ways, right? It's hilarious when I look back on that now, right? Because this experience was so incredibly humbling. So when you kind of do the scan and you do the scan through, oh yes, let me just finish my first thought. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit here. That I really said, even though this is uncomfortable, right? And even though this is not a good financial decision for me to not be working right now, I'm going to challenge myself and push myself to say, I am going to take as much time off as I can. Thanks. I'm going to take this time off because my work as a therapist, this is one thing I feel really grateful for. My work as a therapist before this had really shown me evidence time and time and time again that we either deal with this now or we deal with this later. And I remember somebody saying to me, in the earlier stages of my loss that, April, you're probably going to have an easier time going through this because you're a therapist. And I remember thinking that's such bullshit, right? Like, I have not been trained to deal with the death of my daughter. But in hindsight, looking back on it, I realized that there was actually a really few really important things that my work and my clients definitely had taught me. And one of the things was this: we deal with it now or we deal with it later. I had seen so many people in my practice where it was 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, these 50-year-old women that were coming in to see me. And really, it was this stuff, this floodgates that had kind of just opened in their life based on stuff, based on stuff that had happened in their life that they now suddenly were just getting bombarded with for no known reason, right? All of a sudden they were having all these dreams and all these flashbacks. And I was like, I am well aware of the cost of just trying to push through this. And I'm going to take care of this right now as it's happening. So truly, ladies, you have so much of my respect right now for even just showing up to this call. This is a really good piece of evidence that you really are giving yourself some of the care and the time and the respect that this experience deserves. It's not easy to do, right? That is so not easy to do. And one of the reasons is that guilt, right? The guilt that we have when our partners go back to work and we don't. The guilt we have when somebody at work is filling in for us and we know that our absence possibly creates a little bit more weight on somebody else's shoulder. And even just that shame that I'm not my old self anymore, and all of the kind of humiliation and humility that comes with that. And so, and that was kind of that case for Kelly Farley, who I had mentioned earlier. He had shared in our interview that we had done that you can watch. So I know it's okay for me to share this here because he had shared it in our recording, that he had really kind of bulldozed through that first year until all of a sudden he was hit with this experience of not being able to function. So painful, right? Rather deal with it now or we deal with it later. And his phrase was that, right, was you can close the door on grief, but it comes in through the window. And I think that there's also that idea that Gabby Bernstein says, which is anything that you put ahead of your recovery, you risk losing. And I don't think that's dramatic. I just think that's true, right? Because this really becomes this important thing about getting still is about solidifying your foundation again, you have just been hit by an earthquake. You really have. Emotionally, mentally, oftentimes physically, your whole system has been absolutely knocked to the ground and turned upside down. So if we try to just pop back up and start running and hitting the ground, right, like our old selves again, we're risking injury in that, right? And we are risking a cost to that. So this piece around getting still, some of the things I would really encourage you to think about. Who can you unfollow on your Facebook accounts or on your Instagram account or in social media? Who are the pictures, right, that really just hit you and trigger you and just add a whole other layer of pain and suffering to your day? I remember one time I was standing in line and I was just kind of impulsively, right, unconsciously checking my phone on my Facebook like I often do. And I remember seeing my friend's newborn announcement and seeing that photo of her newborn baby. And I just was rocked to my core. And that really just created this whole tidal wave for me, right? It took me a few days to kind of just even come back to my previous baseline from that. This stuff is just big and it hits us. So who can you unfollow? I'm just checking my notes for you here. Other things I would say, where else can you remove some of the negativity? Who are the negative people in your life? Who are the people who always just drain you, even at the best of times? Where can you start to create a little bit more distance? Because you all know those people in your life that even at the best of times, you pick up the phone, right? Or you see their text messages coming in, and party is like, oh, hey, it's so-and-so. And the other party is like, God, I hope. I wonder, what it is that she needs now, right? I wonder how much, if I'm just going to have to sit here and listen to like this blast of some fight with her boyfriend again, right? So who are the people that you need to take a little bit of distance from? Because here's what I want you to remember. If you do not have the right to treat your own needs as important right now, then my goodness, when on earth are you ever going to give yourself permission to do this? Permission to treat your own needs as a top priority. And that doesn't mean that we don't care about what anybody else is doing or what's happening in anybody else's life. But I do believe that there's this, I've seen this diagram. It's not my work, it's somebody else's, but it's great. So I'm going to share it with you. And I wish I could remember to give them a proper citation, but I can't. So it's basically this diagram of these circles, and it's how support is supposed to work. And if you're the person who has been directly impacted, if this is your loss, then the support essentially needs to come from outside in. And these outside circles, right? Like maybe that's your mother or your sister or your friend who's also kind of upset about this. You cannot be the person who carries them through this. They need to get their support from that next round, those outside people. Because I think this is also part of that guilt, right? We almost want to, not risk upsetting anybody else. We want to not show other people that we're as impacted as we are because we don't want them to be upset. We don't want them to worry about us, right? And so they actually need to go to their supporters for support, that next circle that's farther removed from you. You can't be the one to carry everybody else through this. I believe that the only people that we actually have responsibility for in this is our partner to some degree, and if you have other kids. Everybody else, you can care about them, but it's not your job to be the one to orchestrate their healing or their survival through this. They need to go to that next level of their survival through this. Can't be you, my dear. And this is what I mean about getting still. How can you take off some of those extra layers that are adding weight to your shoulders? And part of this is a negativity detox. So also, I don't watch a whole lot of news because I I don't want a whole lot of extra layers of negativity on me generally. But that's another one of those ways that even just check in. What are you exposing yourself to in any given day? Are you watching a lot of news? Are you following drama queens on your social media? Do you have friends that are always stirring up stuff or that are always in crisis? Because when you're going through the loss of a baby, you can't be the one to hold your friend's hand as she's griping about her bad boss or her fight with her boyfriend, who she fights with every week, anyways. Can't be you right now. So give yourself some space. The other thing that I want you to do, so my second, how are people doing with this so far? Let me know how you're doing. Yes. So the next thing I want you to do is to take a minute right now to get less lost by taking a look at where you need to go. And I know this is really challenging because everything has become unglued, and everything that you had planned and thought that your life was going to look like right now has been broken and in many different ways. And maybe that's, thank you. And maybe that's only my experience, but let me know if I'm alone on that. Who can relate to that feeling of everything just feeling like it is different and smashed to 1,000 pieces? And we're kind of just floating, turned upside down and unhinged in all of this. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to help you get grounded with some of this right now. Get your pen, get your paper, and write it out. Write out your answer to this question. 5 years from now, when you look back on this time of your life, what do you want to be able to say about yourself? 5 years from now, what do you want to say, be able to say when you look back at this time in your life? What do you want to say about how you and your partner got through this? What do you want to be able to talk about with your partner or your husband or your wife when you're looking back 5 years from now at this time? Is that, oh my gosh, that was the most devastating experience of our lifetime. But I'm so proud of how he and I really maintained our connection to each other. Is that, is that, I just want to say, I made my daughter proud. I wanted to feel proud of me. Yeah. And that was actually one of the things that functioned as a bit of a lifeline for me in this. Because I think that there's so much guilt that we also have, even in that idea of allowing ourselves to get through this. Even the idea of allowing ourselves to start to feel better again is such a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, I know I need to survive this. I know that there's people here who still need me, and I know I'm still alive, whether I want to be in this moment or not. But feels so much like betrayal for our lost little one if we even allow ourselves to start to laugh again, enjoy life again, feel good again. It can feel like we're leaving our lost little ones behind. So one of the things that really helped me with that guilt and that fear was reminding myself that I believe that our lost little ones would want us to feel joy again, that they would want us to return to life again. Because that's what I would want for my daughter had the roles been reversed. Had she been able to live her life and I died at some point in time and she was the one surviving the loss of me, I would want her to mourn me, to remember me, to carry me with her in some way or form. But I would not want her to turn the rest of her life into a shell in order to honor me with her pain forever. It can definitely, definitely feel like, especially when it's the loss of our babies, it can feel like our pain is our only connection with them anymore. Especially when, one of the really hard parts about this experience is no one else around us really has memories or stories or shared history with our lost little one. And one of the horrible, horrible things about this is the absolute stark absence of their presence in this world. So definitely our own pain feels like our connection to our lost little one. So what I want to invite you to do is to consider honoring your lost little one, both with your pain as well as with actual joy. I remember, I think it was a few days. It wasn't that long after I'd lost my little one. But like I said, I think my work had benefited me in some ways, in that I knew some stuff, right? I'd seen some of the stuff play out. And I remember, in those initial stages of just, that stage where you feel half dead and half alive. I remember just having this moment of kind of insight, this thought that if this is how it stays for me, if I self-destruct here completely, the story that will be told about my little girl in my circle of friends and family will be some version that April was fine until Nora happened. And that kind of just made me sick, right? Like that kind of just made me feel sick. And I just remember feeling like I have no idea how I'm going to do this yet. But I know that this is one thing that I can do for my daughter. I don't get to do any of the stuff I want to do with her. I don't get to do any of the stuff that I want to for her. None of it. It's gone. It's taken. But I can spare her from this. I can spare her from her mother's destruction being her legacy. And so that's why, if you look at my website, I use that language where I say, I had that, I say, I'm going to create a legacy of love for her. And so what that means, part of what that means, is I am going to honor my daughter by working towards, and it's always a work in progress, being my best self, by living my life as brightly as I can for her, which is actually why I have this tattoo. This little star is supposed to function as a reminder for me. Some days it does, and some days it doesn't. As a reminder for me to live my life brightly in honor of my little bright-eyed girl. So I want you to just check in. And really, as I move through this, it's okay if this doesn't resonate for you. It's okay if this feels too far away. But I want you to check in. What do you want to be able to say about yourself as you come through this? If it was somehow possible for your little one to be watching you right now, what would you want them to see? And can you consider honoring your last little one with light as well as with the darkness? I know it's not easy stuff. So the other kind of part of this is, when you get that picture in your mind, if you can almost just kind of, I know it's hard, but if you can almost just kind of let yourself picture what 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, or 1 year from now looks like when you're through the worst of this. Because here's what I want you to know. Everyone who is on this retreat with me today, you are already through the worst of this. You have already made it through the absolute worst parts. We all know, and feel free to tell me if you disagree. I don't know about you, There's no worse moment than when I knew that my daughter was not going to live. There's no worse moment than that. There's no worst moment than when you know that you have lost them. There's no worse moment than that. Everything else is hard. Everything else sucks. Everything else is a whole lot of work some days. But you've already made it through that worst moment. And you're going to make it through all the ones that come next. When does this get better? So, so the truth is, I believe that question of when does it get better looks different for everybody. But I do believe that healing is not a passive process. I do believe that this requires your participation and your intentional efforts. And that's going to look different from one day to the next. Worst moment ever, and it happened to me twice in 24 hours with my twins. Oh, that was sad. Brutal. Right? Doesn't get any worse than those moments. So you've already made it through this. And the rest of it, we really figure out as we go, right? That's just the bottom line truth of it. The day that I made that declaration, that promise to myself and to my daughter, that I'm not going to let my self-destruction be my daughter's legacy in this world, I did not know how I was going to do that, right? That did not come with a sense of confidence or with a plan at that time. I was still too lost. I was still too totally unhinged from everything I thought my life was going to look like and the absolute stark absence of that. I didn't know how I was going to do this. I just knew that I needed to commit to the goal that I would. To allow yourself to consider making that declaration to yourself and to your little one right now, if that feels okay for you to do so. And maybe that's even, I'll think about it. Maybe that's even, I will think about that, right? I'll think about that a little bit more. Even if I can't fully commit to that in this moment, that's okay. So, what would this future self be doing? And I know you're not out of the darkness just yet, right? We're still in that forest, and I get it. But when we're in this clearing, what are going to be some of the signs and pieces of evidence that you really are in a better state? That you really are in this place of knowing for sure, knowing absolutely for sure that you're okay, even though you're still hurting, even though we are always going to miss our little ones, right? As you can see, even that emotion's coming up for me during this time with you. We're always going to have that. But when you picture yourself, I want you to picture it in your mind, a year from now, 2 years from now, whenever that is, when you absolutely know for sure that you are okay again, what is that okay version of yourself doing? What are those signs that show you that she's okay? Do you see her eating healthier food as opposed to an entire bag of Oreos? Do you see her getting out and going for a walk? Do you see her allowing herself to laugh again? Do you see her hanging out with friends? Do you see her not hanging out with certain friends? Do you see her enjoying a cup of tea or a glass of wine on the porch with her husband or partner? What are these things? Do you see her actually sleeping through the night? What do you see her getting out and going to yoga class? And I want to encourage you just to write that down. What are some of those things that you see her doing? Because there's two ways to go about doing this. One is we wait and we kind of hope that those things start to happen. The other thing is we start to push ourselves to do some of these things right now. When you picture yourself down the road, that okay version of yourself, what is one thing, and I'm going to ask you to type it to me either privately or to everybody. What is one thing that you imagine that okay version of yourself doing again when you know for sure that she has survived this? Do you see her eating healthier? Do you see her getting out and going for a walk? Do you see her taking some distance from the people who cause her hurt and harm? What do you see her doing? Because one of the things that my work had taught me, right, is that I absolutely believe, thank you, I absolutely believe that everything we do is non neutral. Every single action we take either builds us up again or knocks us down again, right? It either depletes us or it drains us. It either inspires us or it tires us. Love that. Laughing with my soul, not just my mouth. Good job. The mouth comes first. So I'm glad that you're even allowing yourself to almost just kind of try that on. If there's moments that feel slightly genuine, I don't mean the moments when we're faking it because we're trying to just play nice and, with a group of people around us and not be judged by them. I mean the moments when you almost have that instinctual kind of little ha-ha, even though you don't feel it in your gut. Lovely. Saying yes to a friend without having to think about all the possible triggers that I might have to deal with. Right. Good work. Really good work. So here's the thing. So one of the things I knew is that everything either builds me up or knocks me down. And I was very well aware that I was fighting an absolute battle of survival, right? You're climbing that mountain every day. So I knew that even though I did not feel necessarily like going out and doing yoga, I knew that this would serve my system. And I remember at one point saying, I'm just going to say yes to every invitation that comes my way. I tried that on for a while because I know if I'm going to base it on what I feel like doing, my answer is going to be no to everything. It's going to be no to everything. Do I feel like going for a walk? No. Do I feel like getting out of bed? No. Do I feel like going to yoga? No. Do I feel like returning somebody's text? No. I feel like jumping off a bridge, right? That's what I feel like doing. So I knew that I needed to kind of force myself to say yes to some things. Does that feel useful for people? I just want to check in and see how this is feeling for everybody. So here's the thing, if these are some of your measures, and really, really good work, you guys, for even just being able to get some of those pictures in your mind. And if you couldn't do that, that's okay, right? Takes a little bit sometimes to kind of even just get that flowing. But really good work for even just getting yourself to try to imagine and picture what that looks like. Because when we are so lost, when we are so disoriented, all of those pictures get blasted into 1,000 pieces. So this is really important to start to even let yourself look at what would my surviving self be doing? She'd be sitting and having a cup of tea with her partner, right? All right. Can you do that tonight? Can you do that today? Can you get out and go for a walk again? Can you call a friend? Because it doesn't just happen in one moment. That moment when you are truly enjoying the company of your friends and you're laughing, it's not that you don't go for 12 months. And then that one day you go, it's fantastic. You have to start going even when it sucks. And that doesn't mean all the time, but it does mean that you keep some of these doors open. And yes, it needs to look different. Some of this hangout time needs to look different. So there's a question about I don't know when it's right to make myself start to do these things. I would argue that the right time is now. And that there's this idea of reaching, regardless of when your loss is. I think this comes into, I can honor them, both with joy and, both with my survival and with my pain. That starts now. However far along you are in this land of loss, your survival starts now. Because there's no time. There's no trumpet that is going to sound for you that says, it is okay for me to start to feel alive again now. And that's one of the things that our culture actually, really kind of is missing, right? In other cultures, there is often a little bit more etiquette and protocol and support and rituals and ceremonies that help us to do this. But when we go through the loss of a little one, there's usually such a stark absence of that. So we're all kind of winging it as we go, which is one of the reasons why I believe it is so powerful and so important to come into these kinds of spaces like you're doing right now, and to be actually getting support from people who really know what they're talking about because they've been there. So the third thing that I want to get you to do with me today is we're going to write out your support map. I want you to get a really clear, concrete, in black and white look at who is your team. Because of this, when we look at this experience of being lost and disoriented, these are the people that are going to be your anchors. And because that's one of the things that changes, right? Oftentimes our relationships with so many people and so many settings changes greatly. So here's what I want you to do. So I'm just hearing that there's somebody like yelling outside the building right now. So I don't know if you guys can hear that. Anyways. Yes. So I want you to write down right now, who are the names of the people? And it's fine if it's only one or if it's only two, right? We're not looking for quantity. We're looking for quality, ladies. Who are the people in your life that you absolutely know have your back, really? Who are the people that really have actually taken a few steps closer to you, as opposed to those few steps farther back away, as so many others do? Who are the people that have your back? Write it down. Write down your names so that freaked out amygdala part of your brain can get some concrete visual evidence that you have some anchors, that you have some backup here. That you have some people who are helping you through. And post in the chat with me if you're comfortable to do so. What are even some of the other resources? Maybe that's books you've read, podcasts you've listened to, blogs you've come across, websites you've come across, Facebook groups that you've come across that have actually offered you something really positive and supportive through all of this. I am going to invite you to share those, anything that comes to mind, with the people here, so we can kind of share some of that. Where are the places that you've been able to go to feel a little bit better? Where are the places that have felt a little bit safer for you to interact with? Write it down, and please share it if you're comfortable to do so. What are some of the books you've read? What are some of the people that you've come across? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was really my hope. So when I Calm app, very nice. I'm also a big fan of, I'm going to write Buddhify. I think I'm spelling that right. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Oh, sorry. I'm going to write that right. That's another app that I really like. It's got meditations for sleep. It's got meditations for thank you, 11 Less Facebook group. Yes. So that was, that actually always means so much to me, truly, whenever people let me know that, because there's times when you're doing this work where, except when I'm talking to my clients directly, that I don't really know for sure, right, what the impact is, the work that I'm putting out there. But I absolutely knew that I felt very called and compelled to share some of the things that I knew worked, because finding peace in a frantic world, my mindfulness book. Nice job. Calm app. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks so much, guys. So the next thing I want you to write out and think about, what was it like for you the last time that you asked for help? When was the last time that you asked for help? Write it out and feel free to message me either privately or group. When was the last time that you asked for help? And the reason why I'm asking you to think about this is because I think for a lot of us, asking and receiving help is really not very comfortable, right? It's really not. So for a lot of us, we are, myself included, right, back in the day, and sometimes still present day, right? I think it's always a bit of a work in progress. Way more comfortable giving support rather than receiving support. It feels way more comfortable to be the person who's going to pop in and help you with your hard day rather than it is being the person who say, I'm struggling, and I'm lost. And so what we often do instead is people say, hey, so how are you? Right? They do that thing. Hey, how are you? And we go, fine, fine. No, I'm fine. I'm managing it. I'm okay. I'm fine. When, what you really mean is I actually haven't slept in a while. And I don't know which side is up and which side is down. And I don't really have a clue how I'm going to get through this. I don't have a clue. Right? Very cool. Nice work. Yeah. And so this is one of the things that I often hear from people, right? Sometimes when I meet with clients, one of the first things that they tell me is that they waited a long time, right? Oh, nice. They waited a long time because we have so much pressure and so much judgment and so much self-judgment that says that we should just take care of this on our own. And all of that kind of self-doubt that kicks in that says, maybe I'm just not coping well. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe so-and-so is right, that I should just be able to shake this off and be okay again, right? And so this can feel like failure. And I think this also ties into the stereotype in a way of getting support. So, for me, one of the things that I did early on was I got myself a therapist. And I remember some people that I've shared that with have said like, you got a therapist? Like you are a therapist. And I was like, well, yeah. So this is kind of why I trust that process because I know that a good therapist, the right fit, because that's the critical piece that you need to keep in mind, right? The right fit of good therapists can make an incredible difference in helping you to get through this. So for me, it felt like, I had this picture in my mind of kind of this table, right? And when you've had the legs of that table kind of broken, I wanted to reinforce that in whatever way I could. So getting a therapist was one of the first things that I did. So what are the things, right? What are those self-attacking, self-judgmental thoughts that you've maybe even been launching at yourself in that dark cloud of your own mind without even realizing that we're doing it? What are those things that you've been saying to yourself? Maybe I should just be able to do this. Maybe I should be over this by now. Maybe so-and-so's right? What are those kinds of things that have actually been really good, nice, that have actually been really holding you in that pain and holding you underwater in there, right? Because I think that's the way that this works. And instead, it's this really big paradigm shift to say, I don't want to test my mettle and see if I can just push harder to get through this, right? I actually want to make this profound and sacred experience for myself as gentle as possible, even though it's never fully gentle, and as easy as possible, even though it's never easy. I want to allow myself to really take care of this wholly. So even just check in. When are the times where other people have asked you how you're doing or if you need anything? And how often have you said to them, no, I'm fine, right? Nope, I'm fine. So this thing of allowing yourself to actually look at your support map and start to make use of this And where can you bolster or add to that? Is it that you need to seek out a local support group? Because sometimes that's a good fit for people. Is it that you need to check out a program like my baby loss survival guide that really it's created so you can do it at home any time of day, right? Do you need something like that? Do you need to allow yourself to pick up a book off of Amazon, right? That's just going to help you to sit with this in a different way. Do you need to join a Facebook group, right? Even if that's my Love and Loss Facebook group or whatever that is that feels right for you. Allow yourself to ask yourself that question. What might make this just a little bit easier than doing this the hardest way possible? So look at your support map. And even those places, write it down, where those places that you go that feel nourishing, right? For me, one of those places was the yoga studio. I didn't have to worry about there being babies there. I didn't have to worry about people talking because they have a rule of silence, right? So I knew that that was a place that I did not have to function or put a mask on, right? That mask that we sometimes have to wear when we go into various social settings. Where are the places that feel safe and nourishing? Where are the places and people that inspire you as opposed to tire you? This distinction is key and it matters. And it's kind of like this thing, and I know when we're in the worst of it, it feels like nothing we do matters, so why bother, right? But I really want you to hear this. It's like drops in a bucket. It really is. So, going to yoga one day is not going to make this better. Guaranteed. You know it. I know it, right? That's 100%. But it's the process of feeling a little bit better, or at the very least, less crappy. Little bit, little bit, little bit. And this kind of circles back to that question of when do you start doing it? Right now. Today, right? Tomorrow. We'll count this as one for today, right? Next one tomorrow. Whatever that small thing is, where can you bring in just a little bit more nourishment and allow yourself to receive a little bit more support? And part of this means challenging that kind of voice in the back of our head that shames us and judges us and makes us feel guilty for receiving and makes us feel guilty for not just being the one to give and take care of and function in all the ways we used to before this. So I'm just going to check in. Does anybody have any questions that they want me to talk a little bit about? Because I'm going to pull up some of the questions that came in, but I would also really like to hear from people on the line. How is all this sitting for you? What's standing out to you? What do you maybe need me to explain a little bit more, or what questions does this bring up for you? All right. So one of the questions that came into me says, I've been feeling really low because a close friend has just had an ectopic pregnancy, and I think it's brought up some things that are of service to me. The problem I find is that when I start to go down, I carry on going down, and it takes a while to get back up. Is this just a part of the process, and I have to ride it out? Or can I stop myself continuing going down somehow? Thank you so much for sharing this with me. There's a few things that really stands up to me. I love these words of it brought some things to service for me. And this is kind of what it is, right? Because there really is that thing that even though these things suck and they hurt and they stir up so much for us, it's like that pressure cooker that just kind of makes everything boil up to the surface. That stuff that we were maybe kind of managing or maybe kind of just trying to keep down, and it pushes that stuff to the surface. And then we're able to take care of it, right? So this stuff is pro and con. Yes, that hurts like hell, and let's take care of that a little bit, right? So I would say yes to both of these things. One, it's part of the process. And two, definitely, you still have to jump in there because this stuff, this magnitude of this pain and this depression and this overwhelm that kicks in, I think it's risky. I believe, right? So, one of the reasons why I fought so hard in those earlier stages of my grief was because I was actually terrified of grief. I had seen it crumble people, I had seen it turn people into total shells of their previous self, where they just became bitter or small or angry at the world or afraid to go out, right? So, yes, for me, I was terrified of grief in some ways because I felt like if I just kind of let this go, right, and didn't do anything with it, then I was at risk of not being somebody I wanted to be. So, yes, you have to jump in there. Healing is not passive. So, I think that this comes into a little bit of this ebb and flow. And I often use the thing of one day, right, which sounds kind of funny, but you get a day to stay in bed, eat the Oreos, feel like shit, be in the worst of it, right? Because sometimes it's just so much bigger than us than we can't, right? It's not a realistic request to say, come on, get up, go do stuff, right? We all know there's times where it's just so much bigger. But I like to encourage people to think about one day, and then day two, you bring in one small thing on purpose. That might be I walk around the block. That might be I return the text message of a friend. That might be I get out my journal and I write some of this stuff out so I can stop it from swirling and festering inside that dark pit of my head and my heart, to getting some of it released out onto paper form, which I believe is a powerful act, even though that sounds super flimsy and simple. You still have to jump in there with one small thing. And I think we can always, 99% of the time, and feel free to challenge me if you disagree, 99% of the time, we can do one small thing, even if that's coming into my Facebook group and posting, having a shit day, right? Don't say shit, I swear sometimes, but other people find it offensive sometimes. So I'm sorry if you're one of those people. I'm having a really bad day, right? Share it. Let us know. So I'm just going to minimize the second see if people are saying. And sometimes that's right. It really is that thing that all we can do is our best. But truly, our best is going to look different from one day to the next. It just really is. Why do people assume that just after a few months after your loss, you're okay? Nobody in my circle even brings it up or asks if I'm okay anymore. They did for the first few weeks and now nothing. It's like for them, it never happened. Is it uncomfortable for people to talk about it? Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's definitely one of those factors. So the example that you might often hear me say is when my uncle died, right? Everybody knows the standard protocol of how we treat somebody and what the actions are that we take when somebody's spouse died. We all know what we do, right? Well, say it with me. We go to the wake. We send a card. If we're close to them, we drop off a casserole. We continue to check in on them, right? We go and we tell stories about what a great guy he was. What's the protocol for when you lose a baby? What is the standard expectation? There isn't one, right? And one of the things that I think is evidence of this, go into a card store, see if there's any cards on miscarriage or pregnancy loss or baby loss. I've never seen one, right? Other than the specific things that people have created online, I've never seen a miscarriage card in a store. What kind of crap is that? And how much volumes does that speak about what a taboo, silent, isolating topic infant loss is? There's so much silence. So this is one of the things that you're experiencing when everybody else kind of goes quiet. People don't know what to expect. They don't know how to support you sometimes. They don't know if they're supposed to say something or not. So I believe that this is, one of the extra hard layers that we have to go through when we lose a baby is we get forced into this position of having to educate the people around us. And I believe that this is also one of the ways that we can continue to parent our little ones even when they're not here. And I know that doesn't feel good, right? I certainly get the emptiness of that in many ways. But there's so much that we don't get to do. And I think that sometimes taking our own responsibility for our own role as our little one's mom and letting other people know that we want our baby to be remembered, we want our baby to be talked about, is one of the ways that we can own our position as our little one's mom. And so I think that means one of the ways to maybe do that is I'd ask you, are there some people that you are able to share what you just shared with us here with them? Can you let some people know, God, this is so hard. It feels like everyone has just stopped talking about my baby. It feels like everyone expects me to be okay. Are there some people, look at your support map, you know who the people are who feel safe, and you know who the people are who probably don't get it and don't know how, right? And you know the people who are a maybe. Where can you start to reach out a little bit more? And I know that's hard, but that's one of the things that I might suggest on that. It's hard to look forward to the future. I can't make myself believe that this will get better. How can I convince myself that this intense grief will get lighter? So I guess my question is, if you and I were having this conversation really on a one-to-one basis, I would be asking you a little bit more about what those things are and what that stuff is that gets in the way of being able to believe that this will get better. Is it because this has been the long line and many difficult things that you've had to live through? Is this because the pain of this is so unbelievably earth-shattering? It's like you have been split apart. I would definitely get a little bit more curious with you about some of that. But for the sake of this call here, or this conversation here and now, I will say that one of the things that helps to convince us is those little pieces of concrete evidence. Even the fact that you're coming here today is letting your system, right, that kind of amygdala part of your brain, even get some evidence and some awareness that you're taking care of this, that you're treating this as if it matters, that you're treating your pain as if it is exactly as important as it is. And I think that's one of the things that starts to convince us that we actually are going to be able to get through this, because we start to see that one day does not just look the exact same as the day before that. Because maybe today what you did different was coming in here, as opposed to yesterday that looked like whatever yesterday looked like for you. And so what would be that one more little thing that you can do tomorrow to just start to create a story of what your survival through this is looking like? So I hope that's helpful for you. I'm just going to pull up some of the other questions that came in. The question is, give me a second. I'm at work and there are a lot of coworkers pregnant right now. I usually try to sit away from them. So since all the pregnancy talk gets me emotional right now, and I can't even congratulate them. So I just avoid them, but I don't want to come off as rude. Any other ideas for how to deal with them? So the first thing I want to say is I actually love that you're allowing yourself to have a little bit of space and that you're allowing yourself to kind of do a little bit of avoidance. Because when you think about it, work, right? And some of these social settings might function the same. You're locked in, right? Like you have to be there if you have to be there. You have to be there. And so it makes sense to me that you're being cautious and careful about how much of that pregnancy baby talk that you are forcing yourself to endure in 1 8-hour period. So I would say, first off, give yourself a little bit of credit in honoring your own intuition and your own gut instincts around that. I think that might be valid. The other piece that I hear you saying in this is I'm worried that I'm going to be perceived as rude. And I think sometimes that happens. But what I want you to know is you are not being rude. You are a grieving mom. You are not being rude. You are grieving. And these are actually two very different things. Part of the question then becomes, how do you start to let people know that these are two different things? And so I would ask you again, who are the safe people in that circle? Who are the people that you can maybe let know, here's what I've gone through, right? And we don't have to get into all the details with people, but I think it's okay to say, you know what, I recently, no matter how far away or how close that was for you, I've actually lost a baby. And so it's really hard for me to really, hear a lot of that pregnancy and baby loss talk. Because it sounds like right now what you've been doing, and I respect it and I get it, right, is that survival of just kind of like surrounding yourself in some bubble wrap right now, right? So it sounds to me like you haven't really let other people know this. And you know your workplace and what feels appropriate and what feels doesn't. But women are really relational creatures, right? We want that connection. And so, yeah, chances are people are wanting that connection with you. And they might be noticing that you're not there. So maybe consider, if it feels right for you in those settings, in those relationships, maybe you approach some of those pregnant people one-to-one and you say, you know what, I just want you to know, I know I haven't really, it probably looks a little bit like I've been avoiding you, or I know I haven't really kind of been talking with you about this. It's actually just that I've lost a baby and this is still really raw for me. Of course, right. How could it not be? And what people do with that, so then this moves into the thing. What people do with that then is on them. I feel like the rule of thumb is if I've done my 50% and in just a really kind way, I let people know where I'm at or what I need. And if they react badly to that, because this is our fear, right? Or otherwise we probably would have already done this. So when we really check in on this, what is that fear? Is it the fear that people are going to judge you? Is it the fear that they're going to not respond well? Right? So when we actually kind of look at this and put this out into the daylight, what has stopped you so far from reaching out and being known? Being known and being seen. It's vulnerable, right? Super uncomfortable. And maybe this ties back into that shame thing, right? It feels crappy in so many ways, feels vulnerable in so many ways to be the one who's not just able to do everything and be everything to everybody and fulfill all of those social conventions of what people are expecting from us when they're making their pregnancy announcements and talking about how uncomfortable their fat ankles are getting right now, right? It's painful. So maybe challenge yourself to kind of think a little bit about what would this look like for you to be seen a little bit more here. And if that doesn't feel right for you for whatever reason in this particular setting, then maybe you suspend and address that judgment that you are hurling on yourself for I'm being rude. right? If I'm being a good person, a good friend, a good colleague, then I should just be able to, right? Or if I'm handling this well, if I'm coping well, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to, then I should be able to just be sitting there and being fine. That took me a very long time to be able to actually sit there and be a part of people's pregnancy conversations, right? And there's moments when that still triggers for me. So give yourself some realistic expectations here too. I'm just going to take a look at my questions one more time, pulling up my document here. Question is, I got a positive pregnancy test after trying for almost a year following the loss of our son, and I am terrified. The slightest symptom, like what I experienced with our loss, turns me into an anxious mess. How do I get over the fear? So, thank you for sharing this with me. And no doubt that's terrifying, right? So terrifying. Because that's kind of what our system does, right? So part of the thing I want you to think of this as is truly that physical experience of the fear. Your system, totally understandably so, is on high alert, right? Everything we notice, every sensation, every feeling, every pain, right? We go into that place of, oh my goodness, what is happening to me? So the first thing I would say is, as you probably are already doing, make sure that you are sharing your concerns and your history, and that you have a really good healthcare provider team that you feel heard and respected by. Super important. And the next kind of piece in terms of the fear itself, I love that you are naming it. I love that you are naming the fear, because there really is this idea in therapy world that we talk about, which is that you've got to name it to tame it. You have got to name it to tame it. So instead of just being like, oh, I'm freaking out, I don't feel okay, I don't know what's going on for me, I am feeling fear. I have so much fear and so much anxiousness, right? Because that's what anxiousness is, especially in these settings. I am afraid. And when you name it in this way, then you're able to take care of it. Ah, right. Of course I'm feeling afraid. Of course I'm feeling afraid. So then we can start to get a little bit of distance from the emotion itself, and we don't totally just merge with it and get completely lost out to sea in it, which is what happens, right, when we're just not naming it. So name it. And then what can you do to burn off some of that anxious coursing cortisol, adrenaline, stress hormones that are going through your body? Is it safe and comfortable for you to get out for a walk? Are you able to get onto a yoga mat? What can grief, I absolutely believe, and fear 100% is a physical experience, and I believe it needs to be treated as such. So in conversation with your healthcare providers, what is some of the physical activity that you're able to do? Because do you ever notice when we're in this fearful state, right? Like I mentioned before, this is when we're doing the pacing. This is when we maybe have a hard time eating. This is when we just like, it's almost like we're shaking, we can't breathe, right? Because your system is in this state of fight or flight. You've got to burn off some of that anxious energy. And the other piece is that there's a book actually that I really like and I recently read that I think might be nice comfort and company for you, which is, what is it called? Expecting Sunshine. And it's from Alexis Marie Shute, I believe is her last name. And that can be a nice book just as a little bit of company and companion that will remind you that this is universal, that this is inevitable, that you are going to have this fear and this anxiety come up. Of course you are. So it's about getting really intentional and conscious about how you tend to those emotions. Writing it out, right? So I think there really is that thing. This is the most important thing you have going on. Get out your journal, write it out. I am freaking out. I am feeling fear. What is my fear? And then you do that self-talk, right? The self-talk is really important. What are the things I'm saying to myself? I'm saying, oh my goodness, what if this is the same thing that's happening then? Okay, what can I tell myself instead? I'm okay. I have a meeting with my healthcare provider yesterday. She reassured me everything's okay. All right, right, bit by bit. And this is that thing, kind of like what we mentioned before, that pregnancy piece after the loss of a baby is both incredibly challenging and can be incredibly healing for that same reason that it's like that pressure cooker that pushes all of these old emotions, all of these old sensations, all of these fears up to the surface. So feel it to heal it. So I think, let me just see if I've got a few more questions here, see if I can find them. My biggest issue at the moment is the guilt. I'm approaching 40. I've had 3 consecutive losses and no living children. I feel like the dream of motherhood is coming to an end. My relationship broke down over my grief and my issue of being pregnant, being around pregnant people and babies. It's all a bit messy. So again, if we were having this conversation one-to-one, I would definitely be asking a little bit more questions to make sure that I'm understanding you right. But here's what I'm really curious about, and you don't have to share this here, but just to think about this guilt. This guilt that had I still been with my partner, then I would have an easier access to the idea of getting pregnant again. My partner and I could be trying to get pregnant again. And so somehow this means that I have screwed up, because if it wasn't for me being around pregnant people and freaking out about that and being around babies and having a hard time with that, then somehow my partner would be able to be here with me and I would have a chance of pregnancy, and I've screwed that up. That's part of what I hear in this. And maybe I'm wrong because we're not able to have this conversation fully for you to let me know if I'm right or wrong. But that's a little bit about what I hear sneaking in here. So the first thing I want to let you know, the whole point of partnership is that it's supposed to make our life easier. That's the whole point. I think of partnership as, in many ways, if we were running a 3-legged race, right? We want somebody who moves along with us. And if your partner is not able or willing to do that with you, and he's not willing or able to do counseling with you so that you can learn to do that differently together, then this relationship was probably going to end at some point in time anyways. And I'm sorry to be blunt if that feels hurtful at all. My relationship broke down because of my grief and my issue of being around pregnant people and babies. So what this really, really is, let's call it out for what it is. Your relationship broke up because you and your partner, he was not able to be there for you and take care of for you in the way that you deserved. I'm going to ask everybody, hands up or comment, have you had a hard time being around pregnant people and babies? Like 100%, right? This has taken me a long time and a lot of work to be able to do that. So absolutely, I do not know. Actually, that's not true. I rarely encounter someone for who being around pregnant people and babies does not feel gut-wrenching and overwhelming and sends them into absolute trigger overload. So let go of this guilt that had you been able to do that better, you would still have your partner and you would still have a chance for another pregnancy right now. This isn't on you. It's not on you. Because if that was truly the bottom line of what this relationship about, every single person who went through this, who has gone through the loss of a baby, would be single right now. Because every single one of us, with the exception of that 0.001%, freak out and become upset when we're around babies and pregnancy. So let go. I'm going to invite you to retire that story that you've been telling yourself, that my partner would be here right now if I had been able to deal with pregnant people and babies better. That's just you beating yourself up right now. That's all that is in action. The other kind of part of this question is this idea of I'm 40 and maybe I've missed my opportunity. So first off, I'm not a doctor, but you might want to check with your doctor about how true or untrue that is. The other thing that you might want to look at for yourself with this, and I know that this is really hard, and this may or may not fit for you. Like I said, if we were talking on the line, I might be going the direction with you of talking a little bit more about your role as a parent and what you need and want to experience. So that might be my first question for you. Do you need to experience parenting? Is that a must for you? Is that an absolute I need it? Because if it is, then let's just own that you want to be a parent and that's a bottom line. So that when you actually own that bottom line, then you are able to move into any step that you need to do next with that bottom line as being treated as sacred and a fact. And then you figure out how you honor that after, right? It reminds me a little bit of, there's this book, it's called Dear Sugar, and it is written by Cheryl Strayed. And what it is it's basically her advice column. And so there's this one question that came in that always has just hit home for me. And it was this woman talking about how, I think I had that question went. This woman was talking about, she was freaking out because she was single. She was getting a little bit later in her 30s, towards her 40s. And she was freaking out because she had not yet found someone to partner with and have children with. And for her, this meant that she was not going to be able to parent. And Cheryl Strayed had this advice or response that always just kind of stuck with me. And she was like, oh, right. The dad and family dream, right? That dream that we have all kind of been told is really what we're all reaching for. And she said, but here's the thing. It's not a guarantee. We are told that it is, and we're told that our success and our value is based on the idea of this achieving it. But here's the thing that happens, and she went through this list of examples. She said, my friend so-and-so came home one day and found her husband in bed with the neighbor. Daddy family dream has been smashed, right? She is now single parenting. This looks very different than the picture that she had. Another friend's spouse died. She is now single parenting. And this picture, this dream has been smashed into a million pieces. And when we kind of just look at some of this, we have this picture in our mind that we feel like we have full control over, or we're supposed to have full control over, that in many ways we just don't. So I would say begin by owning your own bottom line truth. I want to parent. And the rest of it, I would not make dependent on who shows up and when. I would move forward with the idea of this is what I want. And I would hang on to that. And I would let that guide all your next steps and decisions that you do, wherever that takes you, and whatever the way that feels right for you. So I hope that feels a little bit helpful. How are people doing here? So I have one more question that I think I'm going to take a moment for. The other thing I struggle with is acceptance. I'm 9 months into this journey, and there are parts of my life that are starting to return to some kind of normality. The parts of me are fighting this from happening because it doesn't feel right. And I don't want people to forget my babies and forget how fragile I am because I start to cope with things more. Absolutely. So I love, again, that you are really identifying and naming these fears. And I think that that actually, is very much the risk that I hear from a lot of women when we talk about, what makes you hold yourself back from laughing. And it is often that guilt around, sorry, just minimizing this here. It's often that guilt of and fear, which I think sometimes is valid. What if people get the wrong idea and they think that the loss of my little one doesn't matter anymore, and they think that I should just be then over this? And so I think it circles back a little bit to this idea of claiming your role as your little one's mother. And so, people do this in different ways, but I would say part of this job description of being your lost little one's mother is that you are the memory keeper of your little one, not everybody else. It's not up to your friend Jane or your coworker Helen or your mother-in-law to take care of your little one. This is one of the ways that you get to carry them. Own your role, mama. And so maybe what that looks like is you look at specific things, small ways that you can really hold and create space for them. So I know women who have done incredible, beautiful collages of various different pieces that remind them of their baby, or pictures of their ultrasound, or descriptions of their baby's name. And they really kind of literally create physical space in their homes for their baby's memory, which is a very clear statement to anyone who comes into the house. My baby existed. This is important to me. The other kind of thing, and there's another question that came in around this too, right, is really around the idea of how do you want to use social media for this? And I think that what feels comfortable or right is really different for everyone around this. But that's also one of the ways, and I know it feels vulnerable, right? Because we also don't want to be accused of saying we're just attention seeking, or we're just getting stuck in this victim kind of mentality, because I think those are sometimes those things that people hurl at us, right? But this kind of comes into this place of you have to care more about what you think than about what they think. You have to care more about what you think than what they think. And so what that means is that if you want to honor, and this isn't a right or wrong, right? This is totally different for everybody. But if you're feeling drawn to post things on social media, I would encourage you to think about, if you are doing that, then do it because this is what you want. This is the moment of power in that is when you write it and you hit post. That's it. That is the box of power and potency in that. Who sees it? How they respond? Do they care? Do they not care? None of that. When we get lost in that place, we're giving away our power, and we're basically hustling and polling the crowds to say, whose approval do I have? Whose support do I have? Who is rejecting me, right? And I think that gets especially dangerous in social media world, because there's so much that is open for interpretation. I know one client, I know one person who really would spend a lot of energy and a lot of angst and upset really tracking who's commenting on her stuff. Are they liking it? Are they responding? Trying to see if they saw it or not. And, so she would say to me at times, this girl, she would sometimes, tell me all of these stories, these whole stories that she had concocted in her mind about how somebody else felt about her, or what somebody else was thinking about her loss, based solely on the social media interaction of it. And I remember really always just saying, like, careful, right? Be really careful about the assumptions that you're making, because my relationships, right? It's not about what I post or don't post on social media. As much as I love my friends, I'm not following what they post all day long because I'm actually living my life. I'm not following, right, and screening through who's responding to me and who's not. Because when we're in this place, we're basically just running around like a chicken with our head cut off in a state of panic and fear, right? And so instead, I think that social media can be a tool for you to speak your own truth and own part of your own story and own part of your role as your little one's mother, and potentially to take a step forward in breaking some of the isolation and breaking some of the taboo and breaking some of the silence that surrounds other women who have also lost a baby. I think that's where social media can be useful. When it comes into anticipating what kind of response you're going to get from other people, I think that means that we're in some ways opting out of doing the hard work of engaging with people directly, right? So just be a little bit cautious about how you're using that and how you're not. So I hope that that was helpful today. Does anybody else have any questions that they want to share with me here on the line before we wrap up? Because I'm just a little bit aware of the time here. Okay. So the thing that I would like to say is thank you so much, guys, for being here. Thank you. I give so much of my respect for really taking this time to honor your own self, to honor your own healing, to honor your experience of women who are going through the loss of a baby in a culture that remains silent and distant about that. So thank you for being here. Your presence here is also supporting to everybody else in the circle as well. And if it feels like you would like a little bit more support to help you get through some of this, then I am going to be having a few spaces coming open for new clients to work with me one-to-one. So if you had questions that you didn't quite get covered during this time, then feel free to send me an email, and you can reach me through my website, of course. And let me know if you would really like a little bit more support and a little bit more of my private guidance, where we basically just kind of meet like this virtually. And we take a look at really where you're at, how some of this really relates to you in your world, right? Because when I share these ideas here, of course, it's just general, right? Because I don't have all the details of everybody's situation. So you have to take all of this, just with the filtering it through your own wisdom, your own sense of what is right for you and what is not. And if you would like to lean into that a little bit deeper, then I would certainly love to connect with you and love to help support you a little bit more through this. So send me a line if that feels right for you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for all your positive comments. That's really helpful for me. That means a lot. All right. I love you guys. Take care. Oh, yes. And do a little bit of self-care at this. Let yourself change gears. Let yourself get out for a walk, get out for some sunshine, do something to just kind of help yourself. Leave all of this good work behind so that you can re-engage with it again tomorrow when it feels right to do so. All right. Take care of yourselves. Bye.